you as well.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this very hot day. I hope you're keeping well hydrated. If you see me with a wine glass, I promise you it's not wine or cider, it's just orange squash. We're very fortunate today to have a couple of experts in the subject of prioritising mental health at work. But I wanted just to mention up front, the meeting is being recorded. There is a closed caption option for those of you that would like to be able to see what we're talking about as we're saying it. The recordings will be sent out a couple of days at the end, so probably Tuesday next week, along with some fabulous resources that both Ramin and Mandy have provided us with. And I kind of wanted to set the scene a little bit because we all talk about mental health, and actually what we're talking about here is mental ill health. You know, we aspire to be mentally healthy, rather than the mental ill health subject is something that seems to be still quite dirty, quite taboo. The reality is that there are 18 million days lost to mental ill health. That's the current figures. Well, actually, that's a lie. Those were the figures before lockdown, before COVID. So you can imagine the impact that COVID has had on all of us over the last couple of years and the changes that might have made. The most up-to-date figures I could find is 19.6 days are lost due to stress, depression, or anxiety. And actually, Mandy, I know you're going to touch that in the slides, the sort of the difference, because we all need some stress to survive. We need some environment that challenges and agitates us. We're going to touch upon some of the work that Mandy has done within the NHS, some of the work that Ramin does, some of the really sad stories that we hear from assessments that we do for colleagues at Microlink, where people have finally got the courage up to say, gosh, I really do need some help. I've been struggling too long with this, only to find an EAP saying, nah, we're not going to help you, you're a bit too complex. And it's that sort of thing that we kind of want to talk through today, come up with some really straightforward solutions, and introduce you to two fabulous people that you are welcome to get in touch with afterwards. So, Mandy, can I start with you? Can you tell us a bit about ourselves and talk about your fabulous work experience?
Yeah. So thank you for having me, really, Tracy, to begin with. And I hope that some of my clinical experience and some of the areas that I've worked with will be helpful to those that are attending today or future reading the recording or watching the recording. Yeah, my name is Mandy, as I said. I'm an occupational therapist. So a lot of people get us confused with occupational health. We're not occupational health. We are an allied health profession in our own right. We have a science-based training. Part of our training is in mental health and part of our training is in physical health. So I would say we're the only healthcare profession that is regulated by the healthcare professions that is dual trained, properly dual trained. And by that, I mean mental health and physical health. So I basically have worked in the NHS, oh gosh, since 1982. I'm just trying to think now, since 1982, which is an awfully long time. And I've worked in lots of different arenas. I've worked in palliative care, I've worked in mental health services, brain injury services, neurodiversity services, you name it, I've worked there. And one of the things that I've learned is that there needs to be a bit better of unpicking of what we mean by mental ill health and certainly what we can do about it practically. Just going to cough. Excuse me. So next slide, please. I'm hoping that by the end of today, you'll have a better understanding of mental health at work, bit when the mental health condition becomes a more serious concern, which is something that's not often talked about. Some Equality Act and Health and Safety at Work Act considerations, and there's the legislation, and tools and support really that will hopefully give you the confidence to move forward in supporting not just yourselves, because it's really important to start with yourself, but also your colleagues as well. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to put this up here really is why is employee wellbeing so important? Well, as Tracy's just explained, there's an awful lot of days lost because of sickness or ill health or mental ill health. And I've seen a cross section of mainly, I would say, healthcare professions, because my role was an advisor in an acute hospital trust 2 times, and I've dealt with people from significant mental health problems, so colleagues with bipolar, schizophrenia, real depression, right the way through to those that are stressed in the workplace and what can be done about it. But I thought from my point of view, it's important to think about how the NHS is trying to solve this, because it's a high turnover, high pressured role. And the chief exec, just Julian Hartley, said only last October that, you know, we've got to have a diverse workforce that fosters the creativity, innovation and problem solving. That's a given. But inclusive organisations also experience the reduced staff turnover and absenteeism. And there's something in the clue there, inclusive, okay, inclusive organisations. When employees feel valued and respected, they're more motivated, leading to better outcomes and overall satisfaction. They're also more likely to raise concerns over safety and feel safe in their role to offer solutions. And that psychological safety is like gold dust. It really is. To have that ability to just say to a line manager or a colleague, I'm not feeling 100% today. I'm going to need to either take some time away from the workplace or just take 5 seconds literally just to recalibrate. And it's really important that individuals feel safe to do so. Next slide. Okay, so principles of well-being. Now, well-being is important for all of us. These are 5 key principles. Hope. So where people experience mental health difficulties, they get well, stay well, and go on to meet their life dreams and goals. So we all need hope in our lives. That's a given, really. But also it's individuals' personal responsibility. It's up to you, with the assistance of others, to take action and do what needs to be done to keep yourself well. You see lots of things in the papers about, you know, well-being and you know, different aspects of how people can do that, but it's important that it starts with yourself. Education, learning all you can about what you're experiencing so you can make good decisions about aspects of your life. And again, these are the guiding principles. Self-advocacy, effectively reaching out to others so you can get what it is that you need, what you want and what you deserve to support your wellness and recovery. Self-advocacy is also a bit like gold dust. Not many people know how to advocate for themselves. Many people are quite, it's quite a challenge. And I've just seen a pop-up. It certainly is very hard to self-advocate, but it can be learned. These are strategies that can be learned. And again, it's the basis of what you can do differently for you. Also support. So while working towards your own wellness, again, it's up to you receiving that support from others and giving support to others, help you feel better, enhance the quality of your own life. And certainly when I've been working in the NHS, some of those 5 principles tend to get forgotten about. You know, it's very, very difficult, you know, for some folk to take personal responsibility. Some people don't know where to start to advocate for themselves. And quite often people don't know where to turn to for support and educate themselves. Next slide, please. What I wanted to do was look at the difference between stress and mental ill health. And it's that golden nugget, isn't it, of when does stress morph into a more serious health condition? I don't think even society is very clear on that. What I've discovered through my clinical experience is that it seems to be a spectrum. So you may start off in a state of worry or mental tension caused by invariably a very difficult situation. And it could be that you're having a rough time with your neighbours, or you've got problems in a relationship, or your children are just being, you know, perhaps they've reached teenage years and they're giving you a bit of jip. It could be anything that tips you into that anxiety, and it's a natural response. Everybody has this experience. Every single person on the planet has experienced stress at some point of their lives, because it's what makes us survive, really. It's the, you know, the sort of the fight and flight stress response, you know, that's been there since time immemorial. It is short term, but again, just to stress, it's a natural response. And there are pieces of legislation for employers to turn to get some advice about health and well-being at work, and also when stress, when the risk assessments need to happen and what we need to do about it. And there's some very clear guidance on HSE website, but also most employers that I've dealt with have actually created their own bespoke areas so as it's pertinent to their working environment. And recovery happens once the stress is removed or resolved or managed better. But again, going through to the spectrum, it's when does it become a mental ill health? And health conditions that involve changes in emotion, prolonged changes in your thinking, and also changes in your behaviour, they are quite significant markers to say something's all not well. And what I've dealt with is people being in the stress zone, but being chronically exposed to stress for whatever role they have. Some people may be carers in their own right, as well as working, in my experience, in the NHS. And it just tips the balance, and then they start to become overwhelmed, and that affects their emotion. It could affect their sleeping, their eating, all those functional activities of daily living. It can affect you. And long term as well, some people experience these conditions and these illnesses for a prolonged experience, a prolonged period of time. And they reckon that 1 in 4 of us will experience mental ill health at some stage. And that length of time can last anything. I mean, if you look at the Health and Safety at Work Act, anything for people over, say, 3 months experience stress can actually morph into somebody with more prolonged ill health. And no, it's not only just for people in the NHS, it actually covers everybody. The Health and Safety at Work Act and the Equality Act covers every person. So if you're an employee and you happen to be working for a factory, these apply to you as well. It's just that's my personal experience when dealing with all these issues that interface with how people turn up for work and how well they are. What we've also done, and what we're going to share with you, is something called the recovery plan. Again, people can fluctuate in their mental health presentation, and I was talking a bit about colleagues with more significant mental health problems, bipolar and schizophrenia, and they go through periods of wellness but also periods of ill health, and it's important to know what to do and how to support them should their health start to deteriorate. And it's those nuggets of information from the individual themselves that's going to be so important in supporting them through whatever episode they're experiencing at that time. Recovery will happen with treatments and adjustments, and that's something to really bear in mind. Again, many of my colleagues who had more significant mental health problems, they could manage, providing that they had the right treatment and complied with the treatment, but also that the adjustments around them in the workplace were really, really supportive. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to talk about one case study, if that's okay. And again, you'll have to forgive me, it is got an NHS lens, but I think if you look at the actual content of the work itself, can apply to any admin, any role. But this happened to be a medical secretary who worked 9 to 5, 5 days a week, and worked in this role for 10 years. So they'd been, quite a well-established member of staff. And again, even in your own areas of employment, you might be working with people in a factory basis or in education, or it could be any sort of form of employment. Those secretaries, get a good secretary, they're worth their weight in gold. And this particular individual, the task included, administration tasks, prepping and arranging clinics. That could also be prepping and arranging deliveries. It could be anything. Sending out appointment letters, retrieving medical records for that particular person, the consultant in this case, and coordinating timely discharge letters. Obviously, it can be quite a compressed role depending on the medical secretary, but this individual experienced stress because the patient, it's always something that works wrong. The patient booking system, which invariably got changed, had a lot of hiccups. So you can imagine this could go on in any form of life, any sort of change. And that caused stress. So if you think about it, you've got a deadline to meet, you're trying to work your way through a new system, things are going right, things are going wrong, and you don't know who to turn to. I'd feel stressed. And that's the natural response of, you know, gosh, that was a tough day today. I was all over the show trying to, do bookings, etc. But once the individual becomes familiar with the booking system, the stress decreases. So you're removing that stressor, agitator, if you like, and offer support in the workplace. So there was no sickness absence with her at that stage. She managed the booking system really, really well. However, a series of negative life events occurred. I think she lost her partner. If I remember rightly, she lost her partner. She was also starting perimenopausal symptoms, which can be quite tricky. And she also herself had newly diagnosed autism, which tipped her inbuilt coping strategies off the scale. And she had a sickness absence of 8 weeks in total, which isn't really long considering how much she had to deal with. And that's bad luck for a lot of people, but combined would test anybody. I can guarantee you that. So what we did is through, different support services, and this is where Microlink can come in. Workplace needs assessment can provide with implementation of reasonable adjustments. And she had an empowerment passport, but she also included something called the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. So that was something that she was able to start, putting down the things that triggered her. And initially, obviously, newly diagnosed autism, that's only the diagnosis. She's lived as an autistic person for a long time and knew what stresses and what the things that tipped her over, but had managed to mask and cope with it until her resilience or her ability to manage all those life events and changes was just too overwhelming for her. So we worked together to try and find out what those trigger points were to try and help her in her recovery of getting back into the workplace and to be able to manage herself and her own health and well-being in the workplace. She also used the Empowerment Passport as a way of communicating what worked well and what didn't from her own observations. She didn't know she had autism until recently. So again, it was a case of just understanding a little bit about herself, teasing out from her, what's going to work for her, and just being more flexible in the approach. She also applied for access to work as well at this stage because she wanted to have ongoing counselling, and access to work can provide mental health support. We monitored her and she returned to work after the 8 weeks, and she had no further episodes of sick leave for a period of 12 months, which is quite considerable achievement considering all of her life basically became unravelled at one point in her life. So that just gives you just one flavour of, how things can be done a little bit differently to support that individual. Next slide, please. I've given you some resources here, which I know Tracy's going to share with you. And I just thought, have we got the dipping into the not the PowerPoint, the questionnaire of how people are doing? Have we got that ability? The poll?
Yes. Just before give me 1 minute, please. Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Mandy, can I just quickly ask a question that was raised while we've got that pause? We've got somebody who said Mandy mentioned real depression. This implies that something believed to be depression might not actually be depression. And can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's endogenous depression. So it's come from within. Endogenous depression. And basically what that means is that something has happened in their biochemistry, and when I say real depression, everybody experiences depression. I think what I meant to say, probably clumsily, was the fact that somebody can have a genetic predisposition to a depressive illness, which they call it is endogenous, so it's from within. And it's not caused by any particular trigger point or any particular difficulty in their lives at that particular stage. And this is people with endogenous depression or from within tend to start their depressive sort of health issues from around about their late teens, early 20s, and they need probably more significant medication. Does that answer your question?
I'm assuming that it did. I'm sure we'll hear. Oh, look, we've got people working on the poll. I'm loving this.
Excellent. All this is just a quick poll, really just a bit like a reflection of where you are at the moment. That's all. It's not anything deep and meaningful. It's just a check-in. Okay.
Isn't this the thing, though, Mandys, to actually be conscious of what's going on in and around your world, to actually be aware of things that might be really peeing you off or causing you grief and anxiety or giving you joy? Because I don't think we look for the things that give you joy as well, do we?
No, we don't. And I think the human race seems to be primed towards the negative somehow.
Yeah.
I don't quite know why that should be.
Well, you say that, though. If you link on, went on to MSN this morning, all the news is about people dying. This star's died. The Jay Slater boy they haven't found in Tenerife. So-and-so's just fallen off a cliff. It's really depressing. I want to hear about little fluffy puppies and ducklings, preferably. You know, to just to make me feel more joyful on a daily basis.
Yes, so we're just going through the poll here, and it's quite interesting to, again, it's that responsibility. We look at the principles of well-being. What I'm trying to encourage folk to do here is just take a temperature check as to where they are. That's all. You know, nothing deep and meaningful. But if things aren't, when you do the questionnaire and you're noticing things aren't what they could be, that gives you the clue to do something different about it. So it's putting the onus back on you.
Yes, the questioner was saying, yes, it did answer the question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So this question 2 is around the autonomy in your role. And sometimes, you know, people find that they have a lot of choice and control. And that's really good, because that shows that folk are, you know, folk are actually more able to make choices for themselves. And that's actually a stress trigger, is lack of control. That's a stress trigger. So this one is, how satisfied are you with the support you receive for your employee? And again, depends on the size of your organisation, depends on how nurturing your organisation is. You know, it'd be interesting to just find out, just check in. Okay. And then relationships can make or break a situation too. If you're with a team that you're not gelling with, it can be highly anxiety provoking. Conversely, if you're with a team that's fantastic and you all you know, support each other, that doesn't feel like work. Yeah. And relationships is one of the triggers in stress. So when we're looking at stress risk assessments, we look at relationships too.
This is the last question.
Okay. And again, it's just checking in on, you know, are you a workaholic? Are you working far too hard? What are you going to do about it? It starts with you to make some changes, even in the depths of anxiety and depression. And I've experienced that personally. It's crawling back out again to see what you can do differently.
And isn't it strange, once you've done that once, or I've found in my personal experience, once I know where the ladder is in the rabbit hole that I've fallen down, I can find it again. It might, and it takes a shorter period of time as well to find it. You know, the first time I'm literally stumbling around. Yeah. But it's remembering it. And actually, again, it's that consciousness, isn't it? of remembering it and then taking that forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love a good rabbit hole jump every now and again. I think we all do, don't we? It all piles up and you think, damn, I've got nothing to wear. I've put on weight. Work sucks. But, you know, the quicker that you find that ladder, the better. But this isn't necessarily what we're talking about here. Mine's just light touch angst. This is something that could be really impactful.
So I think that sort of concludes my little part of the presentation. Just run over ever so slightly. Sorry about that.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, looking at the poll results? I think it would be a good thing if I don't know whether we're able to share the poll results afterwards as a day. I'm not technology. Anybody who knows me knows that I can't make it work.
I can share the results one by one.
Brilliant.
You see, that would be interesting to see. But I think what we'll do, as Dave, we can leave it for the time being. And if we've got time at the end with questions,
yes, sure.
Perhaps we could go through. That'd be wonderful.
Sure.
So thank you ever so much, Mandy, for sharing that. We've had a few questions which we've answered in the meantime. One was asking, is the Northern Ireland covered under the Equality Act? I'll be honest with you, I thought it was. It actually isn't specifically, elements of it are, but that's always changing given what's going on at Northern Ireland currently. So can I introduce you now to Ramin, please? Ramin, tell us about yourself and your work.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Mandy. Thank you, Tracy. It's really good to be here and really interesting stuff there, Mandy. So thank you for bringing your very thoughtful considerations there from your experience. I'm a workplace assessor. I have my own company called Cornerstone Training. I'm also a qualified mental health first aid trainer. As a mental health first aid trainer, I've been doing that for about 6 years now, but doing workplace assessments since around 2001. And at the last count, I've done about 10,000 of them. Yeah. And a lot of them with microlink. But one of the interesting things is that the workplace assessments tend to be focused mostly on people with physical disabilities. But what you find is that often people with enduring physical disabilities invariably have a mental health condition, particularly chronic conditions. So in a sense, it's almost all of that working life and experience. It's been kind of tapping into the world of mental health difficulties, but it's been under the guise of back problems. It's been under the guise of neurodiverse conditions or menopause and so on and so forth. So it's an area that I'm really invested in. I'm also a chairman of a new mental health charity for 12 to 25-year-olds, or the founding chairman, called Wave Forward. And that's in my part of the world in South Lakeland. And I think the important thing to say is this, is that we, and you guys all know this within the sound of my voice, but I think it's important to communicate this, that we all have mental health, okay? If you're alive today, just like you have physical health, you have mental health, but we're all in different places, and it's important to acknowledge that. Oftentimes when we use the phrase mental health, we view that as being an overwhelmingly negative phrase. And that's understandable because it's only ever really used in a negative sense, but we all have mental health. We're just all in different places. And my passion is really to equip people so that they can take better care of themselves, but also take better care of the person that's next to them. And part of that is delivering this training, whether it's mental health awareness or whether it's the 2-day mental health first aider course, across the whole different sectors, such as, interestingly, the UK Spa Association, or within retail, or some initial, at least recently, within the NHS, and some with other organisations, such as, for me as a Man United fan, Liverpool Football Club. That was an interesting one in itself. And so a lot of life experience in this area is something that's touching me, even as we speak, in terms of the impact of mental health in my own family, including hospital. And so it's something that I really want to press into, and it's a privilege to come and share something of that with you today.
Sorry, that's a natural pause. Apologies there, guys. I think one of the things that we wanted to look at, I mean, we've been talking now for a while, is to really take a look at the kind of solutions that are around, and I think both Ramin and Mandy have touched upon those already. Mandy, could you talk to a really, we're going to put this in the resources, by the way, chaps and ladies, something called a RAP. Mandy, can you talk us through that?
Sure. So the Wellness Recovery Action Plan was created by a lady called Mary Copeland, I think, and a lot of different organisations have actually taken this on board, and it helps when people are having a really, poor mental health, but more significant, long-lasting mental health. So they have periods of wellness, periods of ill health, coming back to the recovery aspect as well. And it deals with, trying to enable that person to define what their triggers are, what things that really get them down, what things that, really make them struggle on a day-to-day basis, but getting them to put that down. So it's like a questionnaire, if you like, and just reflecting, again, I always like to use simple terms of what works well for them and what doesn't, what's important to them and for them. And I dealt with a lady who had significant bipolar conditions and seasonal affective disorder. And she was a nurse in one of our teams. And she really struggled in the winter months, as you could imagine. And it was quite a challenging time for her, but she was able to communicate with us through the RAP, which is a document, what would work well for her and what wouldn't. And, she's got the lived experience of this bipolar. She lives with it all the time. She's the expert, not me, not anybody else. And so it's teasing out from her what her own solutions are and how that could interface in the workplace. Sometimes people write a wellness recovery action plan when they are well, and they write it to the point where they're actually writing it almost like an advanced directive, almost as if, just in case. It's a just in case, like an insurance thing. If you see me do this, and this particular lady I was telling you about, she actually put down in her wellness recovery action plan, when I start wearing bright orange lipstick, and this was her words, not mine, not anybody else's, when I start wearing bright orange lipstick, I'm going off the boil, and I need somebody to step in and help me.
Interesting.
And that's what she did.
So a really subtle signal to the people around her.
Yeah, exactly. Subtle.
So, I mean, do any of you do that? Is there anybody who's got something? I mean, I'm almost the opposite. If I haven't got bright red or red lipstick on, it's a bit of a weird day. There's something not quite right. So it's interesting that somebody's got it the opposite way around with, I can't imagine orange lipstick, but hey ho. But it again, it's that very conscious, isn't it? It is the sharing.
It is. Absolutely, Tracy. It's the person-centered sharing. That's what that is, and that's what the RAP is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think it's really important, isn't it, to note that we, as I said, we're going to send out the RAP. When I saw it, it's something that was developed within the NHS, wasn't it, by a couple of ladies quite a long time ago. But it's a really practical, a bit like the Empowerment Passport, which if you guys haven't seen it, I thoroughly recommend. It's a practical way. We're always talking about adjustments passports. We talk about tailored adjustment plans and the like. All of them have their place. The Empowerment Passport and RAPs are two separate things that I think are definitely worth a look at for businesses. The RAP, because it has that, do you know what, if I start having more of a potty mouth and I'm not wearing lipstick, right, I'm definitely on a downhill slope.
Yeah.
But if my line manager knows that, and he knows what the almost warning signals are, he can say to me privately, Trace, what the hell's up, bird? You haven't got any lipstick on, and you've just said the word 7 times in the last 5 minutes. It's a reality check for me. And actually, for me, it's one of the reasons I love working at Microlink, because we always talk about being the authentic self when you're in the office. Whether you're neurodiverse, whether you're disabled, long-term health condition, or a combination of all of that, or in my case, perimenopausal and slightly weird, You know, it's really nice to know that my colleagues are there supporting me, but they also know when to just leave well alone. But we've got to share some of that information.
Correct.
Because otherwise, how can somebody guess? We're all so very different. And we've got a couple of people on the comments who've mentioned about, thank you, Mandy, for mentioning about, you know, the menopause and neurodivergent traits, because we all know that that can exacerbate excessively. And plus, you know, there's lots and lots of health conditions that can impact. But Ramin, what sort of practical steps do you suggest?
Well, one of the things that we're often talking about, particularly when we run these courses or when I'm engaging people, is around normalizing the conversation around mental health. Yeah. And exploding some of the myths around it, because there's a lot of emotive language around mental health. And if people don't have the framework, or if we're not having the conversations, and the fact that we're British and we're not great at communicating, particularly men, how we feel, then it's really difficult in order for us to move on this. So if the conversation isn't happening, it's buried, it's hidden, it's unseen, and it's only ever addressed at a point of crisis. Okay, so one of the things I often advocate is this, and it's a very simple thing, and
we like simple, Ramin.
Right, and it's this question: how are you doing today? Okay. And one of the funny things around that question is that we Brits, and I'm part Iranian, so it only half affects me.
Okay.
Is that we have reduced that question down to a greeting. And the greeting is, you all right? Yeah. Are you all right? Yeah. And one of the funny parts of that, with all of this serious stuff taken into account, one of the funny parts of it is this, is we Brits are so caught up in communication and non-verbal tics and traits, is that if you say to someone, are you all right? And then they start to tell you how they're doing, we're like, hold on a moment.
That's not what I was asking.
Yeah,
no, I didn't want to know that.
You've broken some of the rules of engagement. And it's like, oh, right, okay. So one of the things that I talk to people around is, and we'll talk about this right from the outset, how are you doing today? No, really, how are you doing today? Because the more we normalize that question, the more we make that as part of our intentionality and our communication with one another, the more we create a space safe where conversations can happen.
Do you think people have got the language for it though, Ramin?
I think often we have to be trained in this area. I think often that intentionality, there's 1,000...
Yeah, Mandy's nodding her head there. Yeah.
There's 1,000 ways that we can ask that question, but I believe it's actually one of the most important questions that we can ask one another, because it tells you I'm interested, it tells you I'm connecting, it tells you that you're valued and that you're important. Yeah. And if we get over the awkwardness of that, and the awkwardness can be, why are you asking me that question? Is there something wrong? Have I got, and what we see is this, is the more people can get used to having that question asked, the more we can start to get comfortable in terms of answering it. And just very briefly, one of the things that we see within the world of mental health is this, and this isn't as simple as this, but this is to draw the illustration out, is that often mental health difficulties, there can be a genetic element, but broadly speaking, mental health difficulties can be as a result of a traumatic event, a life experience. So bam, it's like that hinge turns and something shifts, okay? Or it can be a result, and there's more nuance to this than I'm explaining, but it's for simplicity's sake. It can be a result of the drip, drip, drip of tough stuff. And my resolve starts to drop, my ability to manage it, my capacity is diminished, and then eventually something goes. One of the things that we have seen is this: if we're in a good environment where how are you doing? Is everything okay? Is part of the dialogue, is part of the air that we breathe, then what we see is that significantly reduces the risk of people having bad outcomes, because there's an interest in that person. There's an opportunity to talk about how I'm doing. Now, it might seem overly simple, but actually, That's where life is. The most
Mm.
powerful things that have ever happened in my life have been when somebody has paused long enough to say, are you okay, Ramin? You don't quite see yourself. And they've been brave enough to stop in that moment,
Yeah.
put aside their tick list of to-dos and properly check in with me. So that might sound overly simplistic, but it's actually something that we hugely miss, because we observe shifts in one another that maybe indicate that there's something isn't right. But because we're not equipped and we maybe don't have the tools and we don't want to make things worse, we just carry on as usual until things go really wrong, and then we step in. But when that person talked about how can we bring down waiting lists, how can we reduce that, it's not a quick fix, but one of them is normalize the conversation. Check in with each other to see how we're doing. Make that part of the way that we roll in our organizations, because we're interested in the person in front of us.
And you should be, as a business. You know, if you're talking about, what did we say, 19.6 days a year lost through stress and mental health challenges, that's a month, a work month, isn't it, that's missing. We've got so many comorbidity things going on, but it also needs to be normalised. I mean, we're very fortunate. We have an in-house counsellor, Darren, if you caught the webinar, a few weeks ago, actually, she did a webinar on it, and she's an amazing resource. And internally, it helps the staff at Microlink, because it's somebody who understands the business, who knows the players within the business, so can understand what some of the stresses might be and suggest solutions to it, which is great. Because we've found with people going to the ABs, where they're getting talking therapies, whether they're going to the doctors and they're picking up the brochures. As I pointed out earlier, I picked this up from my hospital when I went for an appointment recently for Kent. It's all great, but people don't follow through on them at all. You know, we're seeing the take up of maybe one or two talking therapy sessions, and then people, because we don't know the language, we don't know how to say what's wrong, what's impacting, what's happening.
That's right. And having those tools to even articulate what's going on with ourselves, is really, really important. And Justin, you know, I love that phrase there, culture eats strategy. And I think that, for example, I've been doing a lot of work with Lakeland. You've heard of Lakeland, the homeware.
I thought you were talking about those kind of like dogs, Lakeland Terriers, but you're not, are you?
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay.
So
I'm very dog orientated. Sorry. Yes.
It's okay. So I propagate this. How are you doing? However we word it, quite a lot. Yesterday, I was doing a bit of a catch up with a new group at Lakeland yesterday, and I started off with saying, "How are you doing today?" And one of them said, "You've trained my manager, haven't you?" And I said,
"Oh, really?
Oh, why?" And she said, "For the last 6 months, that's the way he starts every team meeting. And it has made a material change in the atmosphere of that group coming together, because we know we can come into a safe place and my boss is going to ask how I'm doing before anything else. Before anything else." And you've no idea how much that gladdened my heart, because I was thinking, this is really where it is. And I'm sure you'd understand, Mandy, we overcomplicate it. We lose sight of the person that's in the middle of all of this, because we've got so many other demands upon us. But actually, none of this works if the people are not well and functioning, valued and cared for, and seen as, seen as precious.
Well, even if you don't want to see them as precious or value them as human beings, which, let's face it, an awful lot of businesses don't.
I got it.
Even if you look upon them as a commodity that you have bought and paid for, let's take the personal, let's take the human aspect away. Let's keep those things you've invested in, those items. You don't leave your lovely flash Lotus out in the drive with the soft top down when it's going to rain. So why would you behave in a less than concerned fashion for your most expensive resource?
Exactly.
Why would you do that? So it is that education. Mandy, I'm wondering if we got time. As a day, can we go back to the slides? Let's have a look at the slides. We've got about 15 minutes.
Slides or questions?
The questions. Thank you. Sorry, the poll responses. You see, Azadeh is not only fabulous at her job, but she's really good at coming up with this stuff. So what have we got on here? Mandy, can you give us some sort of talk through on what we're actually looking at?
Yeah,
because there is still a percentage saying
there is
dissatisfied.
Yeah. I mean, this is just a quick, rough and ready reflection, just to ask folk where they're up to, and invite them to join in and invite them to reflect. And so the majority of people are quite satisfied. They score in a 4, some very satisfied, brilliant. And that, what I see there is quite a typical bell curve. If you look at population. So you will always have some people who are quite dissatisfied for various reasons, and you'll have people who are quite okay, but the majority of people fit that, middle of the road sort of bell curve sort of population. So again, this is just how satisfied are you with your own health and well-being? Well, only you can make that choice about how to make that difference, how to actually become from,
because it's a personal side, isn't it?
That's right. From being dissatisfied to being extremely satisfied. What does that journey look like?
What's the next one, please, Azadeh?
Okay, so this one is, are you satisfied with the level of autonomy in your job role? Now, I've directed this really because this is actually a stress risk assessment question. This is part of what I used to do day in and day out, looking when staff were off sick. And again, it's generally more of a bell curve again. But if you look at the majority, we've actually got a shift in the bell curve towards the more positive, which indicates to me that people are generally on this call quite satisfied with the autonomy. In other words, being able to make your own choices and have a bit of control over your working day. If you've ever worked in an environment where somebody else is dictating what you must and mustn't do for a day, that will impact on your mental health exceptionally quickly. And human beings love choice and control.
So part of the work environment is to create a self-directed within the confines of the job that needs to be done.
Of course. Yeah.
Which is interesting because that also bleeds into, doesn't it? Disabled people coming to do a job. It doesn't matter how they achieve that job, the outcomes, as long as they achieve what you need as a business. So it all kind of feeds in. I love it when a plan comes together.
Correct. Yeah. And this one just says, how satisfied are you with the support you receive from your employer? And this is really a reflection and a note for employers to start thinking about this. Again, we've got, more people sort of in the more positive end. They're feeling quite satisfied, but there's still 4% and 30%, 13% aren't happy at all. Wow. And so, that's quite alarming. So that culture is what you were saying before, Ramin, about, and what somebody, I think it was Justin, said on the chat about culture. You can have as many policies, practices and procedures coming out your ears, but if the attitudes around you aren't good, that's when you become unwell. And
we see that a lot, don't we? And there's specific industries. I mean, I worked for a long time in the city doing IT recruitment, and it would almost be very non-PC language here. Sorry, a bit of an alert along the way. But you'd be called a pansy, a sissy, or a puff if you couldn't work 15 hours a day. If you were starting to buckle under the pressure of your targets, the rhetoric around that was not just unhelpful, but incredibly toxic. And I think we've still got a lot of that kind of pressure around, which is awful. One of the things that somebody did mention on here, though, that I wanted to pick up on, they said they've waited, I think it was 9 months. They've got their access to work grant, but they're still waiting 9 months to get that installed and get what they needed actually applied for, bought, and set up in their own systems. A lot of that can be around if there's assistive technology software like drag and read, write, text help, something like that, that needs to be installed and your company doesn't know how to do it. But if any of you are in that position and you need some help, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If it's around mental health and well-being, obviously Mandy and Ramin are you guys and girls on that, or non-binaries. Sorry, I am a child of the 80s. But it's really important what we're talking about here is to get that conversation going and find ways within your organisation that it can be pitched, not as oh my God, I'm failing, I'm going to cost you money as a business and I'm going to crash and burn, it's all going to be really horrible. But what can you do to engender a sensible conversation and resources being there for individuals that they can then signpost either themselves, but use them? Because I mean, Ramin, when you're doing assessments, what do you suggest as solutions around mental health? What sort of things are there commonplace that are used?
Yeah, so within the kind of support that can be provided through the assessments we do with Microling, there is some really good, well, in the neurodiverse world, there's an organisation called Genius Within that are really good.
Yeah, we partner with them. Yeah,
that's right. Coping strategies, giving that person good one-to-one tailored support in order to work things forward. We often do recommend things like stress and anxiety coaching as well, with the emphasis less on kind of the counselling and working through whatever those problems are, important though they are, but putting them in the face of, well, how can I function in the light of this practically day to day and go with this downward?
Give me an example of that.
Well, let me think. So one of the things that we'll often recommend is that, like I said, that one-to-one coaching to come alongside someone. And sometimes it's just really useful to have someone that would be an advocate on your behalf, help you kind of grow in the language. Because one of the things that we often see is that individuals have real difficulty communicating their mental health condition or their neurodiverse condition clearly to their employer. And one of the big reasons around that is because my lived experience is mine, and I can find it difficult to communicate that in a way that isn't emotional, that is loaded, that isn't kind of a case of just dropping that onto the employer. And if the employer hears emotion, hears the weight of my difficulty, they're not actually looking at me as an individual. They're just feeling the weight come upon them. So one of the things that the coaches are really good at doing is working with the individuals in terms of how they can articulate the barriers that they experience on a daily basis, but without all of the emotion. Emotion has its place, but when it comes to getting things done and having changes that are real and sustainable in the workplace, they tend to get in the way. Yeah. So that's one of the areas that the coach can work with people on. How do I articulate my condition to the audience that's relevant? And then how can I start to see a real change? And the coaches are great at helping people do that. If I can just say something on top of that very briefly, Mandy.
Please.
No,
please.
One of the biggest things I've found that is a hedge against poor mental health. Now, this maybe isn't talking so much, although it can be, talking so much in terms of people that have enduring mental health difficulties that they're having to battle with every day. But it's a word that was used earlier on, and it's that word joy. And it's quite an old-fashioned word.
I love the word joy.
Yeah, I do. And what I would say to you is this, and this is for everyone that's listening, is that pursuing joy is one of the greatest hedges against poor mental health. Doing something that you love, something that you're passionate about, something that brings you satisfaction. And it's often that joy is often the first thing to go in terms of doing that thing when the hits the road, but it actually should be a staple, a consistent part of our life is pursuing joy. And if I want everyone to leave with something to think about, if I don't have that thing that brings me joy, and I know that there are seasons of trial and test and challenge, and when we feel like we're in the desert of life, but if there isn't something currently in your life like a dog that brings you joy, then my encouragement to you is pursue it.
Go get a dog. This is my joy that I'm sharing. I actually have 3, and 2 cats. And actually, she's a little bit sleepy. She's blind and has quite a limited life expectancy. But against all of that, the joy of her little head when she rests it on my arm and falls asleep, knowing she's completely safe and looked after, makes the world of difference. It makes all the crap that you go through just disappear. It's not a cure-all when you've got conditions like bipolar or things like that can be very serious. But what it does do for me is exactly what Ramin and Mandy have been talking about, is it gives me a different focus.
That's it.
I'm not focused on woe is me. And I'm not diminishing anybody else's mental health. I've struggled with grief as a mental health challenge for myself personally. And I've shared with Mandy before now, I lost both my parents within 5 days of each other.
Oh, way.
And I'd already lost my brother 10 years before, which seems terribly careless to have lost your entire family in a space of 10 years.
Wow.
But it's the grief from that is very real. And I had to find a way of finding my way through it, or every single day I would cry.
Right.
You know, so it's the joy of, this is Margot Fontaine, by the way, named after a very famous ballerina. And if you don't know who it is, you could look her up. But that is the sort of thing. And it is exactly that, isn't it, Mandy? We drop all the things that we love. You think about the times when you talk to a mate and they've said, you say, when was the last time you painted? When was the last time you did photography? When was the last time you went swimming in the sea? Well, okay, poo might put you off doing that, to be fair. But when was the last time you went to a swimming pool, or, you know, you went and visited your mates? And the answer invariably is, oh, that was ages ago. Yeah, perhaps I should think about that.
Yeah.
So I think we've come back full loop almost to say, please think about, self-regulate as much as you can.
Right.
Find allies that are going to help and support you in the way that you communicate it. Whether or not you want to use the style that Ramin's got in terms of that vocal verbalization of, how are you, Ramin? How's it going, mate? But genuine, whether or not you use something that's a written document like the rap, so that you've got something that you can potentially give to somebody, allow them time to actually read it and absorb what you're saying, and then go back once they've looked at it. So you're not doing the emotional dump on people.
Right.
Actually accept that we do all go through phases of this. And obviously there are clinical depression. There are things that are very serious that need to be dealt with. But that's also something that the Empowerment Passport will help you to have that difficult conversation, or potentially difficult conversation. But for employers, we really want you to understand that your EAP is not the be all and end all. I think what you were talking about, Ramin, about actually not coaching, not doing counselling, but actually saying, here's how you put one foot in front of the other.
Yeah, for sure.
Get through the day. So can I have some final hints and tips from you guys? We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah,
give me some hints and tips.
Very quick one. I just saw one of the questions that came through about pursuing a new career and not sure how to kind of do that. I think, you know, like they say, do something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I think if you're at that kind of place where you're thinking about shifting career, I wouldn't go too far outside of what your passions are. I really wouldn't. I think that has a huge impact. I know too many people that work is something that is duty and necessary that they don't enjoy, and clearly that will have a detrimental impact on you.
Massively. So pursue doing something what you love would be a very simple, basic way of answering that question. Over to you, Mandy.
No, couldn't agree more. That's absolutely fantastic. And I think also just I'd like to add on to it is, you know, develop self-compassion.
Yeah.
Really develop
self-compassion. That's a really good point, Mandy. And I think it's something, I mean, Emma, we've seen you before, and I think it's a really important thing to bear in mind, to be kind to yourself. We always talk about being kind to other people, but we're often the harshest critics of ourselves, aren't we?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, listen, that was a joyful romp through. We've got a minute to go. So we got a question in here I haven't seen. Bear with me. Let's see if we can get this one answered before we go off. Oh, Mandy, you've answered it. Is there a diplomatic way you can think of to respond to the question, "You're all right," with a, "Are you being polite or are you really asking?" Mandy, you've commented on that. What's the
Well,
what was your point on that?
No, I think basically it's a very difficult opening gambit for people. You know, you're noticing something about somebody. You might be wrong, you might not, might be right, but it's I don't know. It just seems to be.
Are you putting people on the spot with it?
Exactly. So I always tend to use observations, and you know, and I gave an example then of, you know, I'm just noticing you're quite quiet. Everything okay? You know, and I put the onus on me, not the person. I'm noticing. You correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. But again, it does start with us as individuals. And I think if we can leave it on that point to say we have a responsibility to look after ourselves. I was, for those of you that don't know, an air stewardess for quite a long time before I went into working as into IT recruitment. And actually, we always learned how to save ourselves first, put on our oxygen masks first, so that we were fit and able to help other people. But we need to do our bit to help ourselves. I hope you've really enjoyed today. Mandy and Ramin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll gladly get all the resources out. And if you've got any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But otherwise than that, have a really good afternoon. Wonderful to see you again, and we'll see you in a month. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.